The Dream Visions. Chapter 83. Now, my son Methuselah, I will recount to you all the visions I have seen, declaring them before you. I experienced two distinct visions, one before I took a wife, when I first learned to write, and another before I married your mother, each unique. For the latter I beheld a dreadful vision for which I earnestly supplicated the Lord. I was lying in the house of my grandfather, Malalel, where a vision came to me showing heaven being cast down and removed, descending upon the earth. As it fell, I witnessed the earth being swallowed by a vast abyss, with mountains piled upon mountains, hills sinking upon hills, and tall trees being uprooted and hurled down into the chasm. Then words burst forth from my mouth as I cried out, "The earth is destroyed." My grandfather, Malalel, who was near, roused me and asked, "Why do you cry so, my son? Why do you lament?" And I relayed the entire vision to him, to which he responded, "My son, you have seen a most terrible thing. Your vision reveals the hidden sins of the earth. It portends that the world is soon to be swallowed by the abyss and utterly destroyed." He urged, "Now, arise and make supplication to the Lord of glory, for your steadfast faith may spare a remnant on the earth and prevent its complete annihilation." He foretold that from heaven all this would descend upon the earth, bringing great destruction upon it. So I arose, prayed, and offered my supplication, writing down my prayer for the generations of eternity, which I now impart to you, my son Methuselah. When I went out below and beheld the sky, the sun rising in the east, the moon setting in the west, the stars scattered across the firmament, and the earth as it had been known from the beginning, I blessed the Lord of judgment and ascribed majesty to him for causing the sun to emerge from the eastern windows, to ascend, and to follow its appointed path across the heavens. Methuselah, a venerable patriarch renowned for his long life and wisdom, Malalel, my revered grandfather, Lord of judgment, a title for God, emphasizing his role as the ultimate arbiter, heavenly vision, a divine revelation disclosing the hidden sins and impending destruction of the earth. Chapter 84. I raised my hands in righteousness and blessed the Holy and Great One, speaking with the breath of my mouth and the tongue fashioned for mortals so that they might utter words. I declared, "Blessed are you, O Lord King, majestic and mighty in power, the Lord of all the heavenly creation, King of kings, and God of the entire world. Your sovereign authority, majesty, and power endure forever, and all the heavens are your eternal throne while the earth serves as your perpetual footstool. For you have created and govern all things, nothing is too challenging for you, and no wisdom escapes your notice, nothing turns away from your presence, for you know, see, and hear everything, leaving nothing concealed. Yet now the angels of your heaven transgress, and your anger rests upon the flesh of men until the day of the great judgment arrives. O God, Lord, and great King, I earnestly beseech you to answer my prayer by sparing a remnant of humanity on earth. Do not wipe out all flesh or render the earth desolate, destined for everlasting destruction. Instead, purge from the earth the unrighteous who have provoked your wrath, while establishing the righteous and upright as a fruitful seed forevermore. Do not hide your face from the supplication of your servant, O Lord. Breath of the mouth, the divine gift enabling human speech, King of kings, a title signifying God's supreme authority, great judgment, the prophesied final reckoning when divine justice is executed. Chapter 85. And after this, I had another dream, and I will recount it to you, my son. Enoch raised his voice and spoke to his son Methuselah, saying, "To you, my son, I speak. Listen carefully to the words of your father's dream vision. Before I took your mother, Edna, I had a vision on my bed. Behold, a white bull emerged from the earth, and after it came a heifer, accompanied by two bullocks, one black and the other red. And the black bullock struck the red one and chased it across the earth, and from that moment, I could no longer see the red bullock. But the black bullock grew larger, and a heifer accompanied it. I saw many bulls emerge from it, resembling it, and they followed in its wake. And the cow, the first one, came from the presence of the original bull, searching for the red bullock but could not find it. She cried out in sorrow and continued to search for it. I watched as the first bull approached her, comforted her, and from that moment, she ceased to cry. Later, she bore another white bull, and following this, she bore many black bulls and cows. I saw, in my dream, how that white bull grew and became a mighty white bull. From it came many other white bulls, each resembling it. These bulls began to produce more white bulls, one after the other, each like the first. Bull, a symbol of power and leadership. Heifer, represents fertility in the continuity of life. Dream vision, a divine revelation symbolizing future events. Chapter 86. As I slept, I looked up and saw a star fall from heaven. It rose again and grazed among the bulls. Then, I saw the large black bulls change their pens, pastures, and heifers, groaning as they did so. I continued observing the vision and looked up at heaven once more. I saw many stars descend from the sky, falling to the first star, and they came to rest among the heifers and bulls, grazing with them. As I watched, these stars exposed their private parts like horses and mated with the cows of the bulls. The cows became pregnant and gave birth to elephants, camels, and donkeys. The bulls were struck with fear and trembled before them. They began to bite, devour, and gore with their horns. This caused the bulls to start devouring one another, and all the inhabitants of earth trembled, fleeing from the chaos. Star, symbolic of heavenly beings or forces that influence earthly life. Bulls, often a symbol of strength or leadership. Pasturing, suggests the mixing of divine or powerful beings with earthly creatures. Chapter 87. As I watched, I saw how they began to attack and devour one another, and the earth cried out in distress. Then I looked up at the sky again and saw a vision. Behold, beings resembling white men descended from heaven. 4 emerged from that place, and 3 others followed them. The last 3 took hold of my hand, raised me from the earth, and lifted me to a high place. They showed me a tower towering above the earth, with all the hills below it appearing small. One of them said to me, "Stay here until you have witnessed all that will come upon the elephants, camels, donkeys, stars, and all the bulls." Star, symbolic of heavenly beings or divine forces that influence life on earth. Elephants, camels, and donkeys represent nations or groups of people, often symbolizing burden, strength, or endurance. Bulls, typically a symbol of power, leadership, or divine strength. High place, symbolizing elevation and perspective, often a spiritual or divine view. Chapter 88. And I saw one of those 4 who had come out first, how he took hold of that first star, which had fallen from heaven, bound it by its hands and feet, and threw it into an abyss. That abyss was narrow, deep, horrible, and dark. And one of them drew his sword and gave it to those elephants, camels, and donkeys. They began to strike one another, and the whole earth shook because of them. And as I looked in the vision, behold, one of those 4 who had come out cast a line from heaven, gathered all the large stars, those whose private parts were like the private parts of horses, and bound them by their hands and feet, throwing them into a chasm of the earth. Star, symbolic of celestial beings or divine forces. Elephants, camels, and donkeys, often symbols of nations, people, or burdens. Abyss, a deep or profound space, often representing chaos or punishment. Chasm, a deep fissure or gap, symbolizing separation or containment. Sword, a symbol of judgment or power. Chapter 89. One of the 4 beings approached a white bull and revealed a great mystery to him. Though born a bull, he transformed into a man and constructed a vast vessel for himself. He lived within it, accompanied by 3 bulls, and they were sealed inside. Then, I lifted my eyes to the heavens and saw a lofty structure with 7 channels from which water flowed abundantly into an enclosed space. Springs erupted from beneath the enclosure, and water gushed forth, gradually covering the entire floor. darkness and mist spread over the waters, and the floodwaters rose above the enclosure, overflowing onto the earth. Every bull within the enclosure was gathered together, but they were consumed and destroyed by the floodwaters. Meanwhile, the vessel remained afloat while all other creatures, bulls, elephants, camels, and asses, were submerged, perishing in the depths. I continued watching as the channel ceased, the earth's deep chasms were leveled, and new abysses opened. The floodwaters receded into these abysses, revealing dry land. The vessel settled upon solid ground, the darkness lifted, and light returned. The white bull who had transformed into a man emerged from the vessel, accompanied by the 3 bulls. One was white like him, another was red as blood, and the third was black. Soon, the white bull departed from them. These bulls gave rise to numerous wild animals and birds, lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, badgers, pigs, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens, yet from among them, another white bull was born. The animals began to fight among themselves. The white bull fathered both a wild ass and another white bull, and the number of wild asses increased. This new white bull then fathered a black wild boar and a white sheep. The boar multiplied into a great number, and the sheep produced 12 more sheep. As the 12 sheep matured, one was handed over to the asses, who then passed it on to the wolves, and it lived among them. The Lord gathered the remaining 11 sheep, leading them to dwell with the one that had been given over to the wolves, and they multiplied into numerous flocks. The wolves tormented them, seizing their young and casting them into a great river, while the sheep cried out in distress to their Lord. One sheep, having escaped the wolves, fled to the wild asses, where it mourned and pleaded with the Lord. Hearing its cries, the Lord of the sheep descended from his high dwelling and gazed upon them. He called the sheep that had escaped and commanded it to warn the wolves not to harm the flock. The sheep obeyed and went among the wolves, accompanied by another sheep. Together, they spoke to the wolves, delivering the Lord's warning. However, the wolves grew even more aggressive, oppressing the sheep further. The Lord of the sheep then descended and struck the wolves, causing them to wail in agony, while the sheep remained silent. The sheep escaped, but the blinded wolves pursued them with all their strength. The Lord of the sheep led his flock, and his presence shone with terrifying majesty. The wolves pursued them to the edge of a great body of water, which then split in 2, forming a passage. The Lord stood between the sheep and the wolves, guarding them. As the wolves entered the water, it suddenly surged back together, engulfing and destroying them. The sheep emerged unharmed and journeyed to a barren land without water or pasture. Their eyes opened, and they saw the Lord tending to them, providing nourishment and guidance. A sheep ascended a great rock, sent forth by the Lord. The Lord then revealed himself, and the sheep trembled in fear, unable to look upon him. Overcome with terror, they called upon the sheep that led them, saying, "We cannot bear to stand before our Lord." The leading sheep returned to them, but many had become blind and strayed from the right path. The Lord, filled with wrath, saw their waywardness, and the leading sheep took action, seeking to restore order. Those who had strayed feared and wished to return to their enclosure. The leading sheep gathered others and set out to bring back the lost sheep, punishing the rebellious ones. Then, the leading sheep transformed into a man and built a house for the Lord, gathering all the sheep within it. The leading sheep eventually passed away, and all the large sheep were gone, replaced by smaller ones. They settled near a river and found pasture. Another leader arose among them, leading them across the river. The sheep grieved for their lost leader but continued forward, crossing into a good and fertile land. There, they flourished, and in the midst of the land, a sacred house stood. At times, their eyes were opened, and at other times, they were blinded, until another leader arose and restored them. Wild beasts, dogs, foxes, and wild boars began to prey upon the sheep. Then, a powerful ram emerged among them, fighting off the predators. However, this ram later turned against the sheep, trampling them arrogantly. The Lord then raised another ram to replace him, making him prince over the sheep. This new leader confronted the first ram, warning him. The first ram pursued the second, but in the end, the dogs brought him down. A second ram arose and led the smaller sheep. This ram fathered many sheep but eventually passed away. In its place, a young sheep grew into a ram, becoming the leader of the flock. The sheep multiplied and thrived, while the dogs, foxes, and wild boars became fearful and retreated. The ram defended the sheep, striking down and defeating the wild animals so they could no longer harm the flock. The sheep's dwelling expanded, and a towering structure was built upon it for the Lord of the sheep. Though the house was small, the tower was raised high above it. The Lord stood atop the tower, and a grand feast was prepared before him. However, the sheep strayed from their home, wandering in many directions. The Lord of the sheep sent messengers to bring them back, but the sheep rejected them, even killing some. One messenger escaped, crying out against the sheep. Though they sought to kill him, the Lord intervened, saving him and bringing him to safety. More messengers were sent to warn and plead with the sheep. Despite this, the sheep abandoned the Lord's house and his tower, becoming lost and blind. The Lord allowed destruction to come upon them as a consequence of their betrayal. He handed them over to lions, tigers, wolves, hyenas, and foxes, who tore them apart. The Lord withdrew from their house and tower, delivering them completely into the hands of the wild beasts. Witnessing the destruction, I cried out to the Lord on behalf of the sheep as they were being devoured. Yet, the Lord remained silent, watching as they were consumed, allowing the beasts to feast upon them. Then, he appointed 70 shepherds to tend to the sheep, commanding them to follow his instructions regarding which sheep were to be spared or destroyed. He assigned them a specific number of sheep and gave precise orders concerning their fate. He called another to observe the actions of the shepherds, warning that they would exceed their orders, destroying more sheep than commanded. This observer was to record every excess and violation, noting how many sheep were slaughtered by divine command and how many perished due to the shepherd's own will. These records would serve as testimony against them so the Lord could judge their actions. The shepherds, unaware of this, continued their work, while each wrongful act was documented. I watched as the shepherds carried out their duties, but many exceeded their authority, delivering sheep to the lions. The lions, tigers, and wild boars devoured a great number of sheep, bringing destruction upon them. The sacred tower was burned, and the house of the sheep was torn down. I mourned deeply for the fallen tower, and I could not see whether the sheep had returned to their home. The shepherds and their allies delivered the sheep into the hands of wild beasts, ensuring their destruction. Each shepherd was given an assigned number, and every act of slaughter was recorded in a book. However, the shepherds killed far more than they were instructed to. I wept bitterly for the lost sheep. In my vision, I saw a scribe recording each day's destruction, documenting all the harm done by the shepherds. He presented this record to the Lord of the sheep, listing every transgression. The Lord read the book, sealed it, and set it aside. Then, I saw 3 of the sheep return and attempt to rebuild what had been destroyed, but wild boars hindered their efforts. The sheep persisted, raising the tower once again, calling it the High Tower. They set a feast before it, but the food was impure. The sheep and their shepherds remained blind, unable to see the truth. More sheep were handed over for destruction, trampled underfoot, and devoured. The Lord of the sheep remained silent as the flock scattered and mingled with the wild beasts, receiving no protection. The scribe who had recorded everything brought the book before the Lord, pleading on behalf of the sheep and presenting all the crimes of the shepherds. The Lord took the book, placed it beside him, and dismissed the scribe. The white bull represents Noah, who was chosen to survive the flood and lead the next generation. The vessel symbolizes Noah's Ark, which saved him and his family from the flood. The wolves represent oppressive nations and rulers who sought to destroy God's chosen people. The Lord of the Sheep, a representation of God leading and protecting his people. The ram symbolizes leadership among God's people, including both faithful and corrupt rulers. The ram symbolizes leadership among God's people, including both faithful and corrupt rulers. The tower represents a sacred place of divine presence and authority. The 70 shepherds, leaders or rulers appointed to guide the people, some of whom abused their power. The wild beasts represent oppressive nations and rulers who sought to destroy God's people. The scribe, a divine recorder who documents the deeds of leaders for judgment. The high tower, a restored place of worship or leadership, though its purity is compromised. The abyss, a deep, chaotic space symbolizing destruction or punishment. Volition, one's own will or choice, particularly in reference to the shepherds exceeding their orders. Chapter 90. I watched until 35 shepherds had taken turns guiding the sheep in the same manner, each one completing their assigned time just like the ones before them. Others were given the responsibility to care for the sheep when their time came, each shepherd taking over at his designated moment. After this, I saw in my vision all the birds of the sky appearing, the eagles, vultures, kites, and ravens. The eagles led them all, and began to devour the sheep, pecking out their eyes and consuming their flesh. The sheep cried out as the birds consumed them, and I lamented in my sleep because of that shepherd who had been responsible for their care. I observed until the sheep were entirely devoured by the dogs, eagles, and kites, leaving neither flesh, skin, nor sinew behind, until only their bones remained. These bones fell to the ground, and the number of sheep dwindled. I continued to watch until the time came when 23 more shepherds had pastured the sheep, each completing their term, 58 times in total. Small lambs were born to those white sheep, and they began to open their eyes, able to see and cry out to the sheep. However, the sheep did not respond to them. They remained deaf, and their eyes were blinded to the cries of the lambs. In the vision, I saw the ravens swoop down on the lambs, taking one and tearing it apart, devouring it. I watched as horns grew on the lambs, but the ravens destroyed these horns. I then saw a large horn grow on one of the sheep, and its eyes were opened. The sheep looked at them, and their eyes were opened. It cried out to them, and the rams saw it, running towards it. Yet, the eagles, vultures, ravens, and kites were still attacking the sheep, devouring them relentlessly. The sheep remained silent, but the rams cried out in sorrow. The ravens battled the ram, trying to destroy its horn, but they did not succeed. I watched as the shepherds, eagles, vultures, and kites came together, urging the ravens to break the ram's horn. They fought fiercely, but the ram cried out for help. I observed the man who had written down the names of the shepherds and presented them before the Lord of the sheep. He came to aid the ram, showing it everything, and help was on its way. I then saw the Lord of the sheep arrive in anger, and all those who saw him fled, hiding in the shadows before him. The eagles, vultures, ravens, and kites gathered with the wild sheep, conspiring to break the ram's horn. They supported each other in their efforts, attacking the ram. I saw the man who had written the book at the Lord's command, open the book revealing the destruction caused by the final 12 shepherds. In front of the Lord of the sheep, he showed that they had done even more damage than their predecessors. I watched as the Lord of the sheep took his staff of anger and struck the earth. The earth split open, and all the animals and birds fell into it, sinking and being covered. I then saw a large sword given to the sheep. They went against the wild animals to destroy them, and all the animals and birds fled before them. I observed as a throne was set up in a pleasant land, and the Lord of the sheep sat upon it. All the sealed books were opened before him. The Lord summoned the 7 first white ones and commanded them to bring the first star that had led those others with bodies like horses. They brought it before him. He spoke to the man who rode in front of him, one of the 7 white ones, saying, "Take those 70 shepherds, to whom I entrusted the sheep, and who, on their own authority, killed more than I had commanded." I saw them all bound and standing before him. Judgment was passed first on the stars, who were found guilty, and they were cast into a place of eternal punishment, a deep pit of fire surrounded by pillars of fire. The 70 shepherds were also judged, found guilty, and thrown into the abyss of fire. I saw a similar abyss open in the middle of the earth, full of fire, where the blind sheep were judged and found guilty, and cast into the fire where they burned. This abyss lay to the south of the house. I watched as the sheep burned and their bones turned to ash. I stood up and saw the old house being folded up, its pillars and beams removed, and all the ornaments were taken down. It was moved to a place in the south. I looked as the Lord of the sheep brought forth a new house, much larger and more magnificent than the old one, and set it up in the place where the old house had been. Its pillars and ornaments were new, and greater than the previous house. The Lord of the sheep was in the center. I saw the remaining sheep, all the animals of the earth, and the birds of the sky, bowing down and worshipping the sheep, pleading with them, and obeying their every command. Then, those 3 white figures who had first taken hold of my hand and raised me, joined by the ram holding me, took me and placed me among the sheep before the judgment began. The sheep were all pure white, their wool thick and clean. All those who had been destroyed and scattered, the wild animals, and the birds of the sky gathered in the house, and the Lord of the sheep rejoiced because they were now all good, having returned to his house. I saw as the sword given to the sheep was laid down, brought back into the house, and sealed before the Lord. All the sheep were now enclosed within that house, but they were not confined. The eyes of all the sheep were opened, and they saw clearly, with no one among them who was blind. I saw that the house was large, vast, and extremely full. I saw a white bull born, its horns were large, and all the wild animals and birds were afraid of it, continually seeking its favor. I watched as all species were transformed into white bulls, and the first among them was a wild ox. This wild ox was large and had dark horns. The Lord of the sheep rejoiced over them and all the bulls. I was asleep among them, and I awoke, seeing everything clearly. This is the vision I saw while asleep, and when I awoke, I blessed the Lord of righteousness and gave glory to him. Afterward, I wept bitterly, my tears flowing uncontrollably because of what I had seen. I realized that everything would come to pass as I had seen, and all the deeds of men would unfold in their proper time. That night, I remembered my first dream, and because of it, I wept, disturbed by the vision I had seen. The shepherds, leaders entrusted with guiding the people, some of whom abused their authority, the eagles, vultures, kites, ravens, represent destructive powers and forces that prey upon the sheep. The ram symbolizes a strong, protective leader, the sword, a symbol of divine justice and retribution, the abyss of fire, a place of punishment for those who acted unjustly. The new house represents a place of restoration, larger and more glorious than before. The white bull, a new leader emerging, with great power to protect and lead the flock.